Then in the spring, based on where that tendency goes, they ask for projects that they will help fund. And a lot of that, where those projects go, come from what that conversation was in the fall. And the reason why the Development Commission is recognize that they're filling a gap that we didn't have before, and have kind of working with them to help support do this. And that's been working pretty well. Now, the first time, what they do is when they award the contracts, they do a vote of the people that are there on the top 4 or 5 projects that are submitted. And the first year they did that, well, they also gave everybody who showed up a $500 credit to what they do. But it really wasn't the thing that brought people in there. I was surprised. I thought it'd fill up that whole building. It didn't. What ended up happening is the police departments had some things they wanted, so they had 35 police show up from all over the 5 counties, and they got the first 3 projects. They voted, they voted for that. So they've changed all that system. But point being is that they have that fall get together and discuss what's going on throughout the 5 counties. And then in the spring, they tendency to lean their things to what they discussed in that fall. And it's really worked out pretty well. I just, that builds on what I think you've been talking about, because that stretch to some of that's also has moved now to some of the counties are kind of getting together before they go to the fall meeting to see what they would like the county to do on stuff.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so since this morning I've been tooling around on the website, and I see all kinds of resources and all kinds of things. And one of the things where we're at, because of the broadband grant we have, they actually came up with a brand. One of the things that we're trying to tell our story, one of our perspectives, I guess, that we're trying to promote is that we're a local foods region. We're a hub for local foods, and we have good stories about multi-generational farmers and new people coming into that agribusiness in our local community. So we've created a brand, Canaan Roots, and the tagline of that is Canaan Roots, Nourish, Sustain, Grow. And that ended up being the impetus for us coming together with our EDA. There's an economic initiatives group that gives out small micro loans, smaller loans to businesses that are trying to kickstart something or do something different, Chamber of Commerce, and then this just kind of organic group that grew out of a desire to brand our town, and it's called Grow Cannon Falls, and put together this amazing video and whatever else. But we got together and we had these great conversations, kind of like and it's never happened before. We've all kind of been in our own silos, but now we're together and people want to move forward. So I'm tooling around in your website and I'm looking for frameworks, resources, whatever, and I see that there's a self-assessment. Those kinds of questions, are those better off done by groups having a conversation around that, or is it better to have every person so if we have a large group and we have 35, 40 people come into the room, it's better to have conversations, let each person come up with their answers to some of those questions, and maybe not all of them, but some of them, so at least it can kind of spur on some conversations so that we could at least get a direction of where we want to go, what we want to focus on, what perspective we want to take, the brand, whatever that might be. What is your thoughts about that?
So the power of collaboration is amazing. So once you have the opportunity to bring people together in the room where they're talking and coming up with a consensus position, that's the hardest thing to come up with. So for instance, if all of you had individual ideas about a particular community, deciding which of those positions is the most important from a priority point of view, for you to have gone through that process is more important than the answer.
Yeah.
So my sense is work as a community, answer it from a community perspective, not as an individual, because there are times when people just individually will answer those things, but frankly, they may not have the ability to answer all the questions, right? How many people actually know how many ISPs are, and how many, how much are they spending, or how many students are in a school, or this or that. But as a community, you can pull together that information, answer the question, then you see whether or not you're able to kind of meet the criteria. Again, I think the awards process is really just a vehicle for a whole bunch of things. For us to get data and for you to use your own data for self-reliance purposes. But also, if you do come together as a community around it, there's so much more value that you've learned by having now collaborated and cooperated with your other community members, whoever they are. And that's been part of the process. So a lot of people finally say to us, we didn't apply, but you've certainly helped us move our yardstick further in our community. So we know we've helped a lot of communities. And some of them say to us, well, we're aspirational, we're not going to apply for a variety of reasons, but we'll follow along and learn from you in a variety of different ways. Some of them have traveled with us. They've gone on some of our international missions. They attend our conferences regularly. They collaborate and work together, but they've never applied. I see for the first time, we've just received our list of communities. One of the communities I've said for years should apply, because I know the community, but for some 20 years, they just never applied. Yeah. But I knew that if they did, they'd have a good shot at it, because I know what goes on in that community. They just never bothered. They always attended our conferences. They participate in all sorts of different committees and so forth. But at one point, they kind of realized the value of branding. And somebody came new, I think, into the administration and said, well, you're always involved. Why don't you apply? Now they're challenged to actually do a good presentation. I'm not sure how they'll do. But if they do, I wouldn't be surprised if they could make one of the Smart 21 levels.
I have a question, and I guess anyone could answer. As we're talking about getting more community buy-in, do you have any examples of hidden gems or really untapped populations, people are always missing from the conversation, that have really boosted an application or just boosted the community conversation?
I feel like a lot of meetings I go to are I'm seeing the same people over and over, economic developers or government people, or just the same
people in the community, and how do we reach out and get people who might not care so much, or it might not be on their radar, but are doing cool stuff, to actually get them engaged with that, with the work?
Well, some of the workshops that I've been dealing with more recently, some of the key people that don't show up, city politicians. And you ask the question, why aren't they there? They have the opportunity. Some mayors will show up and a counselor or two will come, but quite a few don't. And you kind of wonder why. This is a unique opportunity to be engaged with your community. It's not a threatening environment. You should come and participate. They'll answer, well, I can be at a meeting every day of my life. Right? So this isn't very, very important from their point of view. But it is transformational. And at some point, maybe they are going to get engaged. So I find counselors, city councilors, to actually lack participation. Another group that I've been very unhappy with over the years, still unhappy with, are urban planners or regional planners. These are people who should be there, right? We get a lot of economic developers participating. We get mayor's offices and their CAOs participating. Why are urban planners there? I keep going to their conferences and presenting and so forth, they need to be there. They are supposed to be taking a look at things from a 360-degree and holistic perspective. And these kinds of gatherings are very important because they do talk about community and how to develop planning and strategies, and they need to be there.
Now, would you say that the people in this room, the regional economic development professional cohorts, are the rural equivalent of an urban planner? I'm just thinking, because that's who a lot of these people are, rural economic development professionals. So are you guys that are urban planners your counterparts?
There aren't a lot of urban planners in rural areas, and maybe a few county planners that are very zoning enforcement-esque, but, right? That would be my perspective with working in both.
But who develops a strategic plan even before they get into master planning? Who develops that vision? Who develops the strategic directions?
In rural, it's the economic development people. Except for big counties that have that, and they're doing septic permits, and they're doing very specific. It's not like being a planner in a metro area, I don't think.
But I think of the conversations we have in the EDA, it sounds like urban planning.
It's interesting in Itasca County, we have an economic development officer, and we have a community development.
So I don't know how typical that is across rural, but, and I think it's such a false construct and it's not a helpful divide. You know, that, oh, we're about the economics and, oh, we're about the, the feel-good community, but anyway, that's how it's staffed in our county.
Yeah. So most rural, regional, and urban planners see themselves different from community development and from economic development. They're a slice in there dealing with the land, the transition of the land piece from one thing to another, or to retain that land piece in a certain way. So they're not going to get involved necessarily with things like, gas and water metering and or the value proposition of an industrial park and how to promote that for foreign direct investment. That's just not part of their lexicon. What they're interested in is master planning around zoning, which is usually in what they call an official plan, and the opportunities then to develop it through zoning and rezoning or committee of adjustments and those sorts of things. But they're not involved in this. Many of them just are not involved in this process. And I'm talking probably more mid to larger communities. So you're asking, who do I see that's not at some of these events? Those kinds of urban planners.
What's really in our reach now is even the smallest cities have put together comprehensive plans. And the city that I live in, we're in the process of upgrading it, and we've invited the townships that surround the border of our city to come in and join in with us. Because we really, well, for the town of 256, we're really not an economic center, but they can come in and at least use 3 businesses we've got, but at least get their input into a comprehensive plan. And some of the cities now in that region are starting to, I know Baxter Brainerd is now putting them together, and Little Falls has just done one. So, that's what they're calling it, is a comprehensive plan, and I think that's what we're looking at here.
Well, in some cases, communities who don't have an urban planner or a regional planner, yes, they use the economic development offices or the community development offices. But within the context of, like in the case of Olds, Alberta, where they made the decision to bring high-speed broadband to every part of their community through what they call ONET, they created an organization that wasn't there before. So the Olds Institute, or that's what it's called, formed a collective collaborating among a number of different organizations. And a lot of the community members apparently see them more important than their city councils, because they're actually taking something that is meaningful forward, and they're taking it to that group to say, look, we'd like to do this or we'd like to do that, and your broadband capabilities and the fact that you collaborate as a group, help us move things forward. So they've worked with the libraries, they've worked with the local theater, recreational facilities, the farming college, and many, many other organizations. And sometimes they see that organization more importantly than they see their local government.
We have a city planner that they contract to come up that's from outside of the area, that when we're going to try to rezone property. And so when they come, we'll get a bill for that person's attendance at that meeting. But it does impact you when somebody comes from a rural area as your city planner, because they just created a density calculator in an area where we don't have a density problem. But now I'm, trying to build a housing unit of 30 units, and we just help to fund the housing study. We know we need 350, I think you guys need 1,400. And I'm dealing with a density calculator that's like, well, based on the lack of acreage, you can put, it's like looking at it. 5% of our people travel more than 30 minutes to get there. So what are we going to do to solve this? And so there is an issue with having people who are prepared to handle rural areas. When you hire a city planner that comes out of Burnsville, they might not quite understand what it is to be in a rural community. And so, and we'll end up putting the bill right when they come up. We'll get the bill for their attendance.
So this morning, John, you talked about, you started as an urban planner, right? Way back. No. But no. The reason I think that, and you said you're disappointed that they're not involved, that urban planners aren't involved. Well, I think that's because it comes down to a personality issue, and you are unique in that. This is how I see it as an economic developer. We have different personalities. That planners are more transactional and, land transactions and bricks and mortar and rules and regulations. And us economic developers are we're salesy, we're trying to make connections, we're building relationships, trying to bring people together. It's just two different types of people. So I just don't think that this is in the wheelhouses of most typical urban planners, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to apologize for the urban planner side. You asked me who doesn't come to the show, and I gave you my perspective. You're absolutely right. Planners, my daughter is a planner, urban planner for the city of Toronto. They don't understand relationships. And when I started getting into the economic development field, I learned very quickly that economic development is all about relationships, and that it's important as a community developer to also have those relationships. So urban planners are, in many cases, they're visionaries, but aren't very good relationship and networking people at all. I'm taking a whole bunch of urban planners with me to Taiwan. I'm not expecting them to relate to anybody. They're going to give their visions and their expertise and all that kind of stuff, and they may or may not make a contact or two. They won't know how to take advantage of the contacts. They'll not ask for a business card. They won't even share their business card. They'll pontificate and hopefully have somebody pat them on the back. That is not how economic developers and community development works. It works on understanding the relationships that people have with the environment that they're in or the circumstances that they're in.
Has John been involved in the process?
Oh yeah, my daughter grew up in it, and I was surprised that she wanted to become an urban planner. thought she was going to go in the fashion industry or something. No, she, anyhow, she's doing that work. Different story. You were talking about agriculture, and one of the things that I meant to respond. I spent some time in Africa, and in Nigeria, they're learning that they can't depend on the oil industry benefits offshore, and the financial services within Africa alone. That seems to be centered quite a bit in Nigeria and Lagos. One of the things that they've learned is that they need to go back to specific skill sets that they lost. Agriculture is one of them. They've discovered that range of Africa below the Sahara and above the southern tier countries, that there's a breadbasket range area where they can grow food from all of Africa. So they call that the breadbasket for Africa. Except that Nigeria has not maintained the skill sets for those things. And they also have not maintained the skill sets or really developed the skill sets for mining. And part of the issue is, how do they now diversify? And they've realized that technology can help them, and that broadband is a key enabler for both. So from a farming agricultural base, things like providing evidence, as you indicated earlier, evidence of how best that they can distribute water, or what the conditions of the soil is, and many other things. Maybe they have drone technology coming in and passing that information back to the university to get analyzed. The cows that are using RFID tagging capabilities so that they can check for the quality of the milk in real time. That can't happen unless you have the broadband capabilities at the farming levels to be able to do that. So there are many things that they require, not only the broadband to enable it, but they need the skill sets. So that brings in the talent issue. And the thing that they have to change is the culture, because in Nigeria, farming is considered a derogatory word. It isn't the kind of employment that any of the parents want their children to go into. So they have to change the mindset, the culture, all those sorts of things. Same thing with mining. They never really developed it. They were having little pickaxes and they were bringing it out in their sacks. Well, today they can have autonomous vehicles go in and completely mine areas without even a human being involved in picking at it. But the machines are able to do it, and they're able to use artificial intelligence to find out where the ore actually is and then bring it out and make that. They have a lot of employment behind the scenes, not at the rock face itself. So here's a country that's beginning to discover its capabilities, but it needs the skill sets to be able to do that. And while you have broadband in a community, it's taking those skill sets here in Minnesota as well to evolve them to another level. And so the next piece of it, the intelligent community piece, is that talent piece that then is the tipping point to the next level that then gets you into the innovation and so forth. So when you start to look at our criteria, there's sort of a step-by-step approach. And it works in Africa, it works here in Minnesota, any which way you want to take it. But my point being, the criteria helps to move your community forward every step of the way.
How do people think we should take Minnesota forward? Pam, go ahead and ask
Okay.
the question.
So real quick, I just want to say, so we have talked about some people not showing up and being part of the projects, being engaged in the communities to help that go. Bill, firsthand, where do we see, nothing negative, and with MBTVs, but not going to be negative, but where are we seeing with the ISP, the providers, are they being engaged Bill, I know you've done several projects and I see you quite often in Swift County. Are there a lot of ISPs being engaged? I mean, are we missing those as well? I mean, anybody that's working, they are being engaged or not?
We actually had, like with our tipping point for us is, we have HBC coming through and laying fiber. And I was telling somebody else this story before. It's crazy. Our area is 30 minutes south of Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, 35 minutes north of Rochester. We have a college town, Northfield, to the west of us, a river town, to the east of us, which is a Blandin community. And our internet is 10 years behind. It's craziness to me how we came to this, but the economic investment, nobody, MediaCom, Frontier, these internet service providers, with the Blandin grant we invited them all to come to the conversation, and one showed up, the one that's providing fiber. And not that that's good, bad, right, wrong. That's an is. So we just started running with that.
And that's the reason I bring that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so what
We're running
about
with
those that kind of have the project going? And to me, I take it personally, we cover 26 counties in Minnesota. I expect that either myself or Julie, my cohort, be part of each community. I don't want to have to put in the internet and then that's it. Good luck. Hopefully it all works well for you. I want to be engaged. I want to be a part of the community. So where is there a shortfall there when it comes to the ISP is not being involved even after a project is completed? So we're talking about the next project, the smart communities, the intelligent communities. I believe as an ISP, we need to be a part of that. And I just didn't know, Bill, and like I said, you're in a lot of these communities. What are you seeing when you're there? Are we missing that part?
Well, I think clearly, I think that even there's a lot of providers who are really good providers, but they kind of say, well, we put the infrastructure in, go make use of it. And I'm a big backer of enlightened self-interest, why people should be involved. And I think that MVTV is a model for, I don't know if you're making any money on all your involvement, but you're sure involved,
More or less volunteer work.
Yeah, and so it would be, to me, if you can get a room, a lot of times in a intelligent community workshop or the Blandin workshops, you get 50 to 75 people who are interested in technology and economic development of the room in a smaller community. You would think that that is 75 of the best existing and prospective customers that a telecom provider has in the community. And it's baffling to me that they're not in the room. And I think many times they may be like the land use planners. They just don't, they're more engineers or they're finance. They don't want to build up expectations or, these are people that there's some providers in Minnesota, a fair number, 100% fiber to the home networks. Anything people could dream of to do on their networks, those networks can sustain. But yet they lack that community feel, be able to sit in a room and turn. I've heard people, I don't want to be seen as putting a hard sell on. Well, come on, isn't that your title? Sales director, marketing? And so, but I think it is because it's, in the past, look at where the telephone industry was. They expect people to call them on the telephone to order telephone service. So they just expect people to come buy it, and then that's, as long as it works, we'll never hear from you again, and that's a nice relationship.
Well, and that kind of goes off too, Bill, kind of what John said earlier when we were talking about reporting and everything, and they were talking about the IP. Well, how many IPs? Well, there you go, talk to a provider in the area, and they can tell you right away, but that's just it. If they're not involved, now you gotta make those phone calls and try and reach the right person.
But when you have Frontier and CenturyLink, good luck.
Yes, so getting them in the room would make it so much easier.
And we've had them at meetings, but they're not gonna come. I mean, we can invite all the time.
Yeah.
They don't come to the table.
I just had a meeting with the transportation person. He had said, that there are roadways where there's 3 different lines that have been
where stuff is and figuring out how we can create a conduit where people can access it without having to recreate a line. You know, where if you put in a line and someone wants to switch servers, why can't they use that line that already exists and switch servers instead of having to put another line in? There's so much redundancy to this process.
Well, this is the Lagrange example I gave earlier. And San Diego and many other mayors have just said, no, we're only going to have one line. And we'll all work together. But, you know, in a lot of the communities, I haven't actually heard the fact that the ISPs and telcos and others aren't participating. Usually around the world, it's what we call a triple helix, right? So government, academia, and the private sector usually show up. I was a little hard on city councilors and planners, but you know, generally speaking, it is a mixed bag that occurs. And our conferences certainly showcase all of the above, and including nonprofits and so forth. But the key is to engage the private sector to participate, because they need to be able to be part of the answering the questions.
Right.
But more importantly, they get to know you, you get to know them, and not that you're giving them sole sourcing opportunities, but you know, it's good to engage them and make them participants.
I'm wondering if I could just ask if the group here, if you had any thoughts to Blandin Foundation about how we could help promote this intelligent community framework in Minnesota, at maybe a state, as a state statewide. What thoughts or suggestions that you have?
It would be interesting to get all the internet service providers, if you could, in a room and just find out where's the commonalities and where's your challenges. Are they unique? Are they in common? And then what could be done to support that? You know, I don't know what is going on with those other internet service providers if they can't send people. I don't know what their story is. All I know is when we invited him, the one showed up. Well, now that's the one that I want to talk to. I mean, that's just the reality of it. But I don't know, friend. I don't know their story. I don't know what's going on.
We're also faced with a lot of the areas out here of one provider.
Yeah. Yep.
And other providers don't want to step on their territory. County that I live in at one point had 13 separate phone companies in one county. It's now down to 6. But they were also the 6. One of the 6 is also the major provider in the northern part of the county, all these cities, and that's it. And when we try to bring some others in, like a co-op or an adjacent phone company, they don't want to come because that's this one county's territory. And we've gone through the gauntlet with sitting down with them on what we'd like to do. Now, I do have to say that sitting here thinking about one of the things that we could do to get them to the table is to sit down and come up with the criteria that we could invite Blandin to come, because Blandin's got the word Blandin carries a heavy hammer. Let me just put it that way. Not that you're swinging one, but it has a heavy hammer in our area. It means something. It's not just say, hey, Todd County, we'd like to talk to you. If we had Blandin and we had a good program set up, did the footwork before we had them come in, that might be something that be worthwhile do it, because like I said, Blandin has a meaning to it and they pay attention to that. They really do.
Already back to your question about like what could we do as Blandin? I would love it if we could have many communities and do the master plan, you know, rather than you guys like create it. Like, wouldn't it be awesome if we could just, if we wanted to participate, and we could just send it over to you and kind of work through you, either through a roundtable process, but have it as a master for, you know, stuff like this.
I mean, like technical, like assistance to help with the whole
Yeah, let's just, breakout sessions, like tomorrow, you said the benchmarks, we're gonna do the breakout sessions, which is great, I think that makes a lot of sense. But have you know, maybe we would have other people involved that would be that knowledge base that we probably need for that. I can see you holding, you're the one who puts it out there, and then we each add what we want to, how we want to participate within our community. And then as you look at it, then you would see it.
You mean like for like a Minnesota wide?
Well, whoever wants to, really. Because when I heard that Red Wing had gotten some funding from the federal government, I had asked her, I go, hey, can we opt in on some of your trainings you're gonna do? Can we use our internet to access what you're gonna do? And it's like, well, you're not really part of our 11 counties that are doing it. It's like, well, I'm willing to pay to access what you're gonna do, because we see the value of it. And I think that's just the hardest thing, is to be small communities and know that good things are happening and not having an access point to it. So if there's a way that you can coordinate that, that would, to me, would be wonderful as a way to.
Even when you talk about that, even almost a webinar kind of
Exactly.
series or
Yeah.
something like that, that you can opt into. And at the end of this webinar, you would learn, I mean, in the world of education, that's becoming, there are so many things that are free now. I don't need to go pay to go to a workshop anymore. There are so many things that I can learn not having to pay anything. Not saying that somebody shouldn't pay for the services that you all, and the information, the knowledge that you bring. That webinar, a webinar series of want to get started, here are your 5, 6 steps to take in who to speak to, who to contact, using, maybe you use the intelligent community framework. Maybe that becomes something you want to start having conversations with community members. Here's some good things that could help bring that conversation.
I think like
But this
Bill
sounds
said,
great.
Bill said earlier, he compared it to the Star City program. And I could see that working really well for this, through the state or however, just because it's a how-to guide, kind of like the whole assessment is. The assessment is really exactly what the Star City was. You market your community, you know your demographics, you know your businesses, you know what I mean? It's
And that's all information you have.
If we're talking about a statewide program, like where does the Minnesota Office of Broadband,
Absolutely.
how do they fit in with this? Are we gonna collaborate with them? Are they gonna buy in on the intelligent communities process? Like, I don't see it working if they have a separate thing and then all the communities are trying to do this other thing. Like,
They have to,
they would have to be
part
of
that part of it.
Well, I think Blandin's already doing enough personally. I mean, I filled out that one-page form for technical assistance for Bill's
Community
help.
broadband resources, right?
Right, for assistance for Bill's help to help us with this application. I thought that was plenty, enough help, because it forced us, I mean, it was there for us, but it forced us to get together and bring us, do it ourselves.
Well, we did experience, so this summer we tried and we got inspired in New York City at the Global Summit. And we met the top 7 intelligent communities. And when we came back, our little team, and Nancy was with us, we were inspired to do this series of workshops that some of you attended, out of which we have a crop of applications. So we kind of did a run at that and something to show for, thanks to all of your hard work and Bill's good coaching. And it does, that momentum is a thing, right? It's a real thing. So maybe with the good feedback and John's presence here and more people hearing about it, we'll can look at, would there be value to do, what would that look like, a 2.0 version of a ICF, starter kit kind of thing. And I appreciate the good ideas about a webinar. That's this kind of program lends itself to that, for sure. And I can say, Angie and I, because he's our new Office of Broadband Development person, after John's presentation this morning, he sidled up to me and said, well, we really need to talk more about this. So I know Angie is impressed and interested, and that it's the conversation we want to continue to have. There is a opportunity cost thing, and Bill and I were joking earlier that maybe the state isn't fast enough. It's hard to work with people. You know, you have to get there's a lot of layers of permissions and stuff, and it may be that we can do this work anyway without a formal part. I mean, there's a price to chase that star. There's a cost to that, and there's also a wonderful resonance. It would be awesome if Minnesota was an intelligent state, right? So that's something for us.
I think it's indeed self-interest. I mean, they're doing all of these like innovation and all of these new things, and all of northeastern Minnesota, we have like no internet up there. So it's like we can't even compete. Like half the state can't even get in on that because we don't have the infrastructure. So I think it would be in their best interest to really like partner on that and sidle up to that so we can actually be inclusive as a whole state, not just the metro area.
I think along with that, I think Canada's done there a lot of work. Now it's the time for the government to come in, and there's always a lot of inertia, and there's a lot of things started. Okay, there's a tipping point where now public needs to come in and start loaning up cash or whatever it is, and we need to make this happen statewide, and maybe that collaboration will help bring that about.
And you can ask them because I think I'm ready to do the double ready certification for a month. I wanted to wait until there were other ones they could look at. It's like, most of the people were looking at it. I'm ready to go, like, let me certify them. Why would I want you to wait for 6 other people to be able to do it?
Well, they only want to leave St. Paul once in a while. Well, about 2 hours to Aiken County is too far.
Getting 2 sites. It was horrendous. Tomorrow, I know, I said all of them.
So I'm in that far, and I'm not even that far along in my community, you know, so should I just be a downer here for a couple of minutes? I mean, I listened to you about Northeastern.
I'm in Pine County, East Center, right there with nothing in there, and I am paying that much for broadband because I want the jobs there. Am I stupid to want those high-paying jobs with good health care in an area without good broadband? And then you talk about the laws, we have to change the laws. I mean, the reason, I mean, I'm sympathetic with Frontier a little bit because they have to buy from all these other internet providers because with earlier federal funding, the other providers, that became their lines. So Frontier can't touch them. So they have to buy from 3 different lines before they get to my business. And then, so that's a barrier. And then they're a for-profit company, you know, so they can't afford to, I mean, with just me there with 61 employees, you know, I mean, they can't afford. Now, Savage looked at, if they did me, they do the whole city of Bruno, you know, and then some of the people in Bruno got excited, yeah, you know, because then it would be but that hasn't moved forward, you know, I don't know why. And then the other downer is that the incumbents, when we did the legislation a while ago, the incumbents were criticizing Blandin. I mean, you know, Bernadine, you had to pull back a little bit so that you weren't, because you're so powerful in the broadband discussion, but some of the legislators were convinced by some of the incumbents that you were evil rather than that's Bill.
Yeah. They like Bernadine. They don't like her message much. But me, that's
I mean, okay.
I'm taller than she is, so.
I mean, how can we get by some of those realities, you know? And am I just stupid for wanting? I mean, everybody around me, you know, my janitor said, when he saw me leaving my office last night with my whole broadband bag, and he said, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, that I just carry all my broadband stuff around with me in case I want to review it at night." He said, "Oh my God, I did broadband." I mean,
If he lives near Cloquet and doesn't have what he needs for the work he wants to do, he's a really incredibly creative person, and he needs better
So Becky, I'm
broadband.
gonna answer you, and that's the whole point of having these courageous leadership boards. I want you to hear Jan Keogh and Mark Erickson say, don't give up. And Nancy Hoffman, you know, what RS Piper did, they weren't stupid. They walked across the street and said, we're gonna do it ourselves. We will not be defeated. So the answer is, if the riders, if the incumbents won't do it, you gotta figure out a way to do it yourself. And that's, we've got a lot of good examples in this state.
Yourself as a business.
As a city,
yourself
as a municipality.
They created a brand new cooperative.
Created a cooperative.
But you're in a tough spot. I mean, Bruno and Tarek, Scenic Highway 23, I mean, that's a tough, you know, I mean, how many people, you have more employees than live in Bruno, right?
Yes. But the bar is doing really well. And we're saving the gas station in town.
Yes, that gas station, I love that gas station.
Isn't it great?
So,
You know, one of the things I haven't heard is today is we talk about ISPs being isolated with one, is the fact that they don't look, they're serving you in front of,
but they're also looking at their bottom line. And if you have a small community of 256 people here and one of 300 over here, they're gonna count up and say, if I dump $6 million into this, how am I gonna,
Right.
I don't know, what am I gonna make back? And what I've
That's why I'm
heard,
sympathetic, yeah.
and what I've heard with the awards, and next door, I said over here before I came in here, was, and it's, I don't know why I've been doing this, how long, Dale, was just before the turn of the century. I hate to say that because they used to be 1900 when I was growing up, but
well, before the turn of the 20th century.
yeah, let's put it that way. Then I recognized that a single entity just doesn't really stand a chance. I think, you know, unless you could do the program, but what I'm saying is, if I look at where I am, if I get 2 or 3 towns and several townships together, I have a much better chance of getting something done. Because then I've got some power and I've got some figures that are up in the thousands that the ISP is going to listen to. And for several times, I went along just worrying about the area that I live in and not a broader sense. And I've seen that today, how successful getting bigger. And that's where what you're talking about, John, is getting these people together just outside of your own little world and getting them together to come together for something like this, because that's a reality. I'm seeing that everything I look at this conference is so far today.
The only thing I would say is that you have to always have your eyes open to the broader community. But along Scenic Highway 23, you have to just, you know, see, is the state of Minnesota doing anything along Scenic Highway 23 with public safety or something to do with the railroad or something where there's another opportunity that might just be you? That, you know, there could, and there are those things that happen. It's just incidental too. You're just a bystander. But if you don't have your eyes open to what's going on around, you just, that opportunity will come and go. There could be Becky might see a meeting for a trail, and you probably go because you love trails and you love meetings, right? But the only, you know, but the only business person I know who loves meetings. But that trail could be an opportunity for a fiber network. So it could be, you know, they don't want to give you any money for broadband, but man, they'll put a bike trail along Scenic 23 and along the rail. And within that bike trail, while they're digging that up, they could put some fiber in there, public safety stuff or whatever. So you have to be open. Northern Pine County tied to GPS 4593.
All the way from Oliver, all the way, you know, on the Minnesota side of the Wisconsin line down south of St. Croix State Park. You know,
Yeah, so you just have to, what I'm saying is,
No, that's further in.
Yeah.
They actually named it the Matt Laurie Trail. He shut down and up. Yeah.
And Becky really wanted to be with us when we did. I got to go out that day, we're talking about this. You would have loved this.
it was fun.
Yeah, so just wanted to add that.
Yeah.
We tried. You had something at your company that was important.
But anyways, just keep your eyes on the regional, but keep your eye on the micro too.
I mean, the train, they say the train is still gonna come, you know, the passenger train is still not totally dead yet, but will come right along that route.
Well, I hope they don't shake your servers when they do with their trains. Be like NPR. But anyways,
I'm looking where Bruno is, right?
yeah, just south of Carrick.
But everybody knows it.
We learn a lot of information. All four of the major carriers, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint, love to come talk to me and tell me what they're doing for public safety.
So I'm gonna take that location, Bruno, Minnesota, and I'm going to give somebody some information, maybe go to Bernadette or something, and tell you what's happening there, mainly because we're gonna get information from Wisconsin on what's going on with Wisconsin, which is probably where you get your connection. And if nothing else, we'll get feedback from the major four carriers and say, what are you doing to get service here? And they can tell you like nothing, or maybe they'll tell you in a few years from now, they're gonna do this. So at least you'll
Becky's a
get
great
some-
customer. You would take a gigabit level of service if you could get it, I'm sure.
But you're right on the border, pretty close. Huh?
But I'll just tell you, when I was first elected in 1990, you know, there was no communication at all. And, you know, I got into office and I said, okay, everybody, bring me the map of what goes to the district I represent. It wasn't quite as far as we are now, you know, but I mean, so I was talking about internet, wasn't? Anyway, they brought me a map and just about the whole area I represented had no lines at all. And everybody thinks I'm so silly that I thought they were joking with me, you know? And I thought they'd taken the map and wiped out all the lines and then made a copy of it for me, you know? And I went, okay, now bring me the real map. Stop joking with me. And there wasn't anything there. And so then I had to work with Dave Bishop down in Rochester. And the lines had to go from Rochester over someplace west and then up to Duluth, you know, to get anything into our area. So then, when I got that piece of legislation written, I had Dave Bishop carry it because I'm just a lowly freshman and he's been there forever and I thought he'd have no more power. So I'm sitting there in that committee. I'm not in the committee, so I'm watching and all the Democrats are voting against it, you know, and as they're all voting against it, I just start writing notes and send them to my colleagues and say, this is my legislation. And then later they told me, you can't do that, you know, you can't have Dave Bishop carry your legislation. I mean, it's so crazy. I said, Mary Murphy said to me, Becky, what, don't you know anything yet? And I said, no, obviously I don't. You know? But I just thought we could like work together, and I thought Dave would have more power because it had to start in Rochester to get there, you know. So that was just a story of
not wanting the other guys to get accredited something good.
yeah. I don't know. It was just weird. However, I will tell you that when I did the Katie for your task force, the day before the announcement, the 3 moms who lost their children were going to be presenting, the legislation. And the night before, Steve Sigum said that none of the Republicans could carry that legislation. So I called the 3 moms and I said, well, you know, we've got 3 options. I mean, we can cancel the press conference. We can go into the press conference without any Republican authors, or we could go into the press conference with Democratic authors from the House, but then there would be no hearings. So what do you want to do? And they said, well, let's just go into the conference without any authors, because we're ready for this conference to talk about our children. So that morning before the conference, I went over to the house and I was just hanging around trying to see if I could get an author, or something. And Dave Bishop walked in and he said, Becky, what are you doing slumming over here? And I told him what had happened and he said, oh, I'll be the author of all 5 pieces of that legislation. And I said, you will, but what about Steve? He said he wouldn't find any of them. And he said, well, I'm chair of appropriations. So, so there you go. I mean, that first mistake I made turned out, Dave Bishop, just an hour later, we went into the conference and Dave Bishop, who was really well respected by everybody, was the chief author of all of the House pieces of legislation. So you see?
Yes, that's a positive. Thanks, Mike.
Better together.
Yeah.
Making connections, making relationships.
So thank you so much for participating so actively in this discussion. That was exactly what we had hoped to accomplish. And as you know, I've said heartily several times already in this meeting today through the conference that I think this framework is great. It does everything you can do, any kind of economic development activity you want in here. But when you use that framework, you have to think more broadly than just, oh, we got to get Bob a job someplace. It's a much bigger picture thinking. And I think it's really effective. And the more we can do to promote this in Minnesota, the more vital rural Minnesota will be.
We'll be a pilot project. I just want to echo my thanks for your great participation. And John, again, I'm so gracious of you to come and be with us in Minnesota. So it's 4 something, and the reception, speaking of the bar up the street, 5:30 back in Norway Center. So I'll see you there.
Thanks, everyone.
Can I just make a quick comment? This morning you mentioned the term that no place is too remote or too small. And it's really important that some of your small rural communities think about self-reliance at the end of the day. And there are many ways in which you can get access. Maybe it's by satellite, maybe it's by other ways. But at the end of the day, it's about collaborating, finding your own resources, finding your own ways to get those resources, because nobody's really going to help you. You need to find that yourselves. And the only other thing I can suggest is that maybe in Minnesota, you need to declare yourselves the way the Finns have gone and declared that broadband is a human right. And if you can't get it as a human right, get at least somebody to agree that it's an essential utility, and not worry that the private sector alone is going to deliver it. Maybe you have to find some other way as an essential utility to deliver it in your communities.
Thank you, John. I just kept this being on. So in Minnesota, we're so fortunate. We have an outfit called the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. Yeah. And one of our Courageous Leadership Awards is going to be given on Thursday to Christopher Mitchell, who has done so much to promote this idea of local self-reliance. And Christopher's going to be in a concluding address, which is going to be fantastic, about the role of how you got to do it yourself and all the examples of local people in very remote and places who have stepped up and said, we will not be defeated. That's a great theme for us.
And you say collaborate, like do it yourself. Can you explain, because collaborating sounds like you're not doing it by yourself. I mean, who are you collaborating with if you do it yourself?
With others in your community. If you're going to pull something off, you yourself may not be able to do it, but some of your people and your next door neighbors or within your region might be able to support it. Maybe they're getting access, but they need, Hudson, Ohio, they got broadband because at the end of the day, the companies were complaining so much, they had to go to another community to go and get broadband service. So they held their meetings in bars and restaurants in another community. They couldn't do it in their own community. So eventually they just, bit the bullet and put some resources together. Now that they have it, they're actually sharing it with other communities. Those other communities didn't go to them. They went out to those other communities. But had the other communities known that they were willing to share, they would have gotten it. So it's a question of having conversations, finding out what else is out there, and collaborate with them and cooperate as much as you can on a regional basis. That's the only way you're going
The
to.
Blandin way we say leadership. You gotta do it yourself, but you can't do it alone.
That's right.
Thank you, John.